We are live with SCI TV. I am Joshua Gordon, the founder of the Sports Conflict Institute. Today we have a wonderful panel including Duncan Fletcher. Duncan, welcome.
Hi, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
So Duncan's of Game Change, Ken Pendleton of SCI. Ken, welcome.
Hi, Josh. Hi, Duncan.
Thanks for being here, Ken. And Vinnie Iyer of Sporting News. Welcome, Vinnie.
Thank you for having me, guys. Good to be with everyone.
So Vinnie, you're our special guest to our panel today, so maybe you could give a little background as to some of the things you focus on in your writing and how you got into it.
Yeah, I've been at the Sporting News since 1999. I've covered the NFL pretty much from 2001. I've been a full-time writer since 2007, so I've been writing a lot of articles for 15 years or so about this league, and it's fun. It's always a wild ride, and it's a round-the-clock, 24/7, 365 type of thing, and now you got off the field just as big as on the field.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. We're hoping for the topic for today to focus a bit on some of how that impact from off the field goes into some of the player evaluation. And you've written recently on Greg Hardy and the signing with Dallas, and certainly these conversations come up in evaluating folks like Jameis Winston versus Marcus Mariota. Can you tell us a little bit about how much, if at all, some of this off-field conduct concerns come into some of the evaluation of players by teams?
Well, especially when you're dealing with a #1 overall pick in your draft, and Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are pretty much a nondescript type franchise. When you draft Jameis Winston, it's not just, okay, we might get a quarterback that can take us to playoffs and win a Super Bowl down the line, but he's also the face of your franchise. He's also the guy that's out there marketing your team as much as possible. So you really have to take that consideration. And in that family with the Glazers, the daughter of Malcolm Glazer is a big player in that. And does she want a guy with all this baggage in front of their organization? That's a big question. It's always that balance. The guys who have more talent seem to have more leeway in terms of what goes on off the field. I don't think that's right, but that's just the reality of the business of getting talented players.
I was going to ask you, in terms of the perception of sort of transgressions taking place off the field versus the reality, I'm just curious, having covered the league now for a long time, what's your take on whether there really is a behavioral issue in the NFL versus how much is sort of manufactured by the media? And what's your take on that in terms of really the reality versus the perception of the off-field issues?
Well, we're not going to focus on the guys that are just doing the right things, having their family, having their foundation, doing good works around the league. That's just not going to sell anything. So we got to focus on the guys that are having the problems. And you're concerned about those guys because it looks like an element is developing. The perception may not be reality, but that's what everyone sees and reports on, because guys just doing normal things and being good people, that doesn't interest us. So we want to see what these guys are doing. I don't think it should exist in any form. And I think when you have football and violent issues, it's a violent game, so a lot of people bring those things together. And with domestic violence, there should be zero tolerance. And I think with that in the NFL, it seems a little wishy-washy to the outside with the way they came down with these penalties, especially with Ray Rice.
We have this ideal that what we would like are players who are perfect gentlemen away from the field, and then, to quote the old expression, agile, hostile, and mobile when they're on the field. And when I think of, Alan Penkin had suggested that the former player at Notre Dame and had a pretty good career with the Oilers, he just said, look, let's face it, even good college teams, let alone pro teams, need a couple of bad guys to be successful. Guys who can, and I think he was really saying that they sort of intimidate not only their opponents, but their teammates a little bit too. Do you think that's true?
I think there's some of that element, and there's some people, the guy just retired from the Steelers, Troy Polamalu, nicest guy you'll ever meet, just spiritual guy off the field, but when he's on the field, he just goes out there, turns on a button, and is a completely different, almost a devil out there on the field. So there's some people who can handle that, but I think the NFL needs to get in there early to say maybe this person is not equipped to do that part on the field and make this transition into what happens away from the game. So I think they need to evaluate the types of people that they're kind of empowering sometimes. And they have to. Jameis Winston is going to be a lightning rod figure. There's going to be a lot of people that say, hey, he's going to maybe be the savior of the Buccaneers, but there's going to be just as many people like worried about, is the NFL going to empower him to do something a little bit more from what we've already heard with his sexual assault accusations.
So, Vinny, what about some of the existing players who are moving around? Greg Hardy, certainly Macy movement with Adrian Peterson, and we don't know what's going to happen yet with Ray Rice. How much are those off-field considerations going to impact those type of decisions? And what are some of the factors that a team that is going to take on a player like that has to wrestle with?
Well, I wrote earlier that Ray Rice, I don't think he's going to be signed by anyone, and it really just comes down to the fact that you have to have value on the field to really overcome all these bad things. And it's really sad, but it's true. Like Greg Hardy is in the prime of his career. Adrian Peterson can be a difference maker on the field still. While Ray Rice has been slowing down for a couple years, and when you have this other black mark that's out there with him now, there's no PR upside or on the field upside of signing this guy. You're just going to get vilified, and you're not going to get much reward from it on the field. So that's just the reality of players like Ray Rice. There's just a tolerance factor for guys who can play and still play this game, and I find that somewhat unfortunate and makes a lot of the hypocritical things that we hear from the NFL make a lot of sense.
And that's interesting, actually, Vinny, to kind of pull the thread on that a little bit. So obviously you're talking about the idea that, talent is always going to trump character, but you also alluded to the idea that there may be a minimum bar in terms of getting access to actually being an athlete in the NFL. Do you think the NFL should go in that direction and allow character to trump, allow character to trump talent? Or what do you think the NFL should be doing in terms of addressing some of these issues and putting the best foot forward as an organization?
Yeah, in the end, you're looking at really, it's one big organization, but it's really 32 little smaller organizations. And there's teams that draw the line that they're not going to go after these type of players, and they're not interested in these type of players. They don't think they can win with them. But then there are teams like the Dallas Cowboys that everyone gets a second chance. I mean, you look at Pac-Man, Adam Jones, they gave him the second chance. Greg Hardy, it's the same deal. I mean, albeit he has to kind of prove it to get the money that they want to pay him, they are a little bit more lenient than other teams. So it's really a case-by-case basis on these teams, and I think the Buccaneers are kind of caught in the middle right now because you look at Lovie Smith, a disciplined guy and a character guy, and there's probably some conflict there with Jameis Winston, and that's why we're not completely sure he's going to be the number one pick. So that's really hanging the balance for the Buccaneers, a team, like I said, beyond not being good on the field, they kind of need to be on the map somehow in the NFL. And I don't know if Jameis Winston is the right place to get them there.
And just to quickly follow up on that, though, Vinny, do you think that there should be a minimum standard that the NFL lays down that impacts all the different teams? Is that something you think that makes sense? And maybe that could apply beyond the NFL and across sport in terms of there's a minimum character bar that people need to relieve. Like maybe you can't have a felony. I'm just curious, what's your reaction to that? And you think it makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, you get into a lot of different sticky things already in the NFL because there are people being punished by them, they're not punished by the law. So there needs to be like a standard way of figuring this out, whether it's you have to be convicted of felony in a court or there has to be some standard. That's the part that's kind of fuzzy. And the Players Association plays into this too because they want their guys to be on the field. So there's always this battle that goes on, and everyone points to the NFL, but the Players Association, hey, they want the fair rights, what they think is fair for their players, whatever they might be accused or rumored of doing or charged with. And I think they kind of play a part in this that maybe we don't look at as much and focus a lot on the NFL.
Right. I mean, I think you're raising a really interesting point about aligning interests, right? Because the fact is the 32 teams, their job is to try to win Super Bowls, be profitable, but they as Bill Belichick candidly said at the time of signing Aaron Hernandez, look, there's some players you say you just can't handle, and then there's other ones you attempt to manage, quote unquote. But the problem is, from the league's point of view, if they had a uniform policy that said, look, if you've had more than, say more than one felony, for example, conviction, you just can't play in the NFL. It wouldn't actually disadvantage any of the 32 teams. They just wouldn't be they wouldn't be able to get those players. But if it's up to the individual team, there's always an incentive to take a chance on a Greg Hardy or or an Adrian Peterson, right, or Jameis Winston. And so I'm wondering if what you think of the idea that, for example, if teams were forced to bear the entirety of someone's contract if they were convicted of a felony, you would change the calculation teams would make, right? Because you'd really have to go, wait a second, if Winston ends up doing something awful, we're gonna be hamstrung with $100 million or $60 million contract over X number of years, and they would really have to weigh that into their calculation in a way they don't now.
Yeah, that's the problem right now. And actually, we've gone the other way with the first-round draft pick, not getting the money they used to. You're not looking at $60 or $70 million guaranteed. You're looking at 25 over 4 years. So, hey, if Jameis Winston, anything happens with him, you're only out $20 million over 4 years. It's a relatively small investment, even if the performance struggles are just on-field related. So, yeah, they have a lot of outs on this end where they can take these chances. I mean, look at the Cowboys deal for Greg Hardy. It's very incentive-based. They're kind of putting a burden on him, so it kind of is no risk for them to sign him at all. And, yeah, I think they have to look at that because there's nothing that they can be held accountable for money-wise when they take these chances.
And Vinny, any final thoughts on this subject in terms of character and the NFL and what might be happening as we look ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's on the league to come up with a more defined policy, be a little bit more in front of it, not be reactionary. The way they were with Ray Rice, it was like, oh, the public is outraged by this, we're going to change it. So I think the one thing that can affect this is if the consumer says, Jameis Winston's out there, I don't want to go and see him because I don't like his character. That's how you're going to hit these teams a little bit, is fans have to be involved in this too. Do they want to be a part of a team that has this character? And then you're going to see this policies change because in the bottom line, this is just about making money and winning. And if getting these types of players prohibit that and cause some concerns with your fan base, then teams are going to start to rethink that.
Excellent thoughts. And for those who want to continue to follow your writing and other ways, what's the best way to follow you and your work?
Yeah, you can all go to sportingnews.com, and I'm at Twitter, very easy to find, Vinnie Iyer, all lowercase. So there and at SN_NFL. So we're all over the place, and it's draft time.
Great. Thanks for joining us today. Thank you, Duncan and Ken. Great episode. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.